Hello, 1517 Podcasts listeners. This is Caleb Keith, director of the 1517 Podcast Network, with a special announcement. Throughout the entire month of June, the Podcast Network at 1517 is hosting a special fundraiser. During the time of this fundraiser, two generous donors are doubling the impact of your generosity by matching dollar for dollar gifts given up to $75,000. The Podcast Network has a goal, including this match, to raise $150,000 during the month of June. These funds will play a crucial role in expanding our network onto additional platforms like YouTube and strategically reaching new audiences with direct marketing and with the creation of new types of content. Your support isn't just figurative. It's a tangible investment in the people and tools necessary to maintain and expand the work of our podcasts. People like the hosts of your favorite shows and the editors and marketing and creative teams behind the scenes that support our podcast throughout the years. Please go to 1517.org/donate-podcast today to help us reach this $150,000 goal. Thank you for being an integral partner of the 1517 Podcast community and for your unwavering dedication to sharing the pure gospel through our shows.
Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast and check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. And while you're over there, make sure you check out everything else that 1517 is doing. You know, the articles, the academies, the events, all the videos. Check out all that stuff. And while you're checking it out and wondering how in the world all this stuff can be so good and so free, well, you can go over to that donate button over there in the right-hand corner and become a supporter, because that's how it's so good and so free, by people supporting the work. We appreciate all of those of you who do that, and if you are not one of them, we would love it if you became one of them, if you are able, and helped us keep doing all the things that we're doing over at 1517. Chad, we finally have gotten through long and many conversations back and forth. We had Job and his three friends, and we had to hear from each of them multiple times as they go back and forth, saying a lot of the same things in different ways. Then we had a young and, we'll say, eager theologian in Elihu come in, and he went on for quite a while as he said all the things. He was angry with Job. He was angry with Job's friends. He was condemning everyone. Ultimately, though, I don't know if he said much that was new. Basically, he said, Job, we all know that you are not just a sinner, but obviously a uniquely terrible sinner. So let's fess up. And it does seem now that as we enter 38, we're going to get a whole different voice. And this is going to be the voice of the Lord. The Lord is going to break in. I don't know if Elihu was like the straw that broke the camel's back and God just had to break in at this point or what, but I'm excited to hear from God in this whole scenario.
Yeah, me too. You know, love Job. Who cannot respect Job?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of very understandable frustration, lament, all that stuff going on. Don't like the four friends, I guess we could say. I mean, yeah, they said a few good things, but a lot of bad things too. But it's time for somebody else to talk. I mean, we have heard from God, but it's been a long time. You know, we had the little celestial conversation that starts off the book of Job between God and Satan. But he's been silent for a whole long time. So it's time for him to speak. Now, having read this far, the first 37 chapters, and having heard basically what Job especially has been asking, desiring, even demanding of God, it's kind of set us up for a divine response. You know, God's finally going to say, all right, Job, you want this? Okay, I'll give it to you. You want a face-to-face? I'll give you a conversation here. But as soon as God starts to talk, we realize, oh, this isn't going to go the way that Job expected it to go. In fact, he's not going to. This is the real shocker of these chapters. In God's speeches, two speeches to Job, not once, not once does he directly answer all the questions that Job has been throwing at him this entire time.
That's very
I mean,
godlike.
he is very godlike. Yes, yeah. I always joke that Jesus is like that. You ask Jesus what time it is. He's like, there was once a man. What are we having for lunch, Jesus? The kingdom of heaven is like. He's never going to give you the direct answer, and God doesn't do that here either. This is what the genre of this kind of response is sometimes called a disputation speech, and it's full of rhetorical questions, full of challenges to the opponent. I mean, the rhetorical questions just one after the other. Where were you? Do you know? All of which anticipate, of course, a negative response. So a lot of good stuff that's coming up here, but it's not the kind of good stuff that we might have anticipated. So it's not going to be the kind of response that Job asked for. But a lot of times God doesn't give us. Maybe most of the time, maybe all of the time. In fact, God doesn't give us the kind of response that we anticipate. Especially in a Job-like situation when you're suffering and you're praying and you're asking God questions, or maybe you're angry and you're giving vent to your anger and frustration with prayer because of your loss, your suffering, whatever it is you're going through. Most of the time, when a divine response comes via the scriptures or via a friend giving you encouragement from the Word of God, whatever it is, it's not the answer that you anticipated. Most of us want to know why. Why did this happen?
Yeah, we want something with some details, right? So like what Job wants to and what we all want to happen is when God finally responds, he wants we expect God to tell him what happened in the first chapter. Well, here's what happened, Job. But God's not going to give him that.
Yeah, if we just were reading straight through Job, we might expect at this point for God to come along and say to Job, well, here, let me tell you how this all started. One day, I was in heaven with my angels, and Satan showed up. And then, go on to tell Job what he's already told us. But that's not what happens. Instead, beginning with chapter 38 and then going into chapter 39, God is going to basically tell Job through a series of rhetorical questions that he has created all things, ordered all things, wisely put all things together, celestial bodies, the sea, Sheol, you name it, and then also the animal world. He goes through a whole list of mainly uh, non-domesticated animals, the horses included, but mainly these are just beasts of the field. He's going to go through all of these various parts of creation, the ordering, the orchestrating of all creation, and demonstrate through these rhetorical questions by which he asked Job that Job has no idea. He's never been there. He's never taken a tour of the ocean floor. He's never been the storehouses of the rain. He's never been in all these places. And so there are things in the universe that are vastly greater than and deeper than and more expansive than Job's little pinpoint of knowledge that he has. So that's where we're going with this section. But to get there, we first of all have to have kind of introduction here, and that's what chapter 38 starts with. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. So whirlwind is the word in Hebrew is the same word that's used in 2 Kings 2 to describe the whirlwind that took Elijah up into heaven. And of course, storms are frequently associated with these kinds of theophanies. This doesn't have all of the divine pyrotechnics that a lot of theophanies have, but it is pretty typical. You have some sort of storm, some sort of earthquake, some sort of whatever it is that's a natural phenomenon, and then from that, God appears or God speaks. And so here it's the whirlwind. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. I think that second verse is critical here. So who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? That word for counsel can also be translated like God's plan or kind of God's design or something like that. So who is this that darkens divine design, divine counsel, divine plan, whatever it is, however you want to translate that, by words without knowledge? So the way that I hear that, and we're going to see the way this is unpacked is through the rest of what God has to say, is that what Job has been speaking from, and many things that he said are spoken basically from ignorance. He's so limited in his knowledge of the divine plan, of the divine design, of all the various things that only God himself has knowledge of and has designed to be the way they are, that Job speaks just unknowingly from ignorance. And so he is the one that is the who is this? He's the one who is speaking a lot of things, but he's not speaking from knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, this might sound like God just took the side of the friends. Like God's like, I'll be the one to go in here and correct Job. But I don't think that's what it is either. I mean, God does not believe these friends are speaking with any knowledge or anything like that. Uh, Certainly, but it's sort of like you might be. I don't know, you might be debating something or whatever, but I'm sure if God broke into any of our theological discourses, it might be similar to this. He might say, "All right, man up, boys. I'm about to ask some questions. We'll see how much you know."
Yeah. Yeah, that third verse, dress for action like a man, that's the ESV's translation of it. It's gird your loins is the old archaic
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah,
So which is
this is just a man up thing, right? I mean,
it
that's
is, yeah. That's specifically applied to men. So gird your loins, pull up those long robes, belt them up, get ready to work, get ready to fight. So man up, dress like you're ready for battle is what God is telling Job. And it's that in of itself, I think is telling. He doesn't tell Job in other words, uh, get on your face in the dirt, close your eyes, and open your ears because I'm going to stand over you and shout. So it's not like that. It's just like two opponents coming together. God's like, oh, okay, you want to battle? We can do that. So you know, gird up your loins, dress for action like a man, and we'll go at it. So there is a sense in which God is setting Job up as his opponent. All right, let's spar, climb the ring. You wanted this, so let's do this. And I'm gonna question you, and then you can teach me. There's a bit of sarcasm here. You can
yeah.
make it known to me.
Yeah, I think we think that God would always be someone that would say he would show up and then say, "Everyone on their hands and knees now, everyone face to the ground." Uh, but yeah, it might be that it might be more worrisome if God shows up and says, "Stand up and face me."
Oh yeah, yeah. If God showed up to me out of the whirlwind and starts talking, I would rather be face down than standing up and have to dress for action like a man. So that's the opening three verses, and then after this, in not quite through the end of the chapter, but 4 through about 38. Yeah, so 4 through 38, he's going to begin with a series of questions that are geared toward the understanding of creation. He's going to talk about the heavens. He's going to talk about the sea. He's going to talk about all the various elements of the terrestrial and celestial creation. So starts out this way. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So there's a lot of Genesis 1 kind of language that's used here in not just in these verses, but in what's coming up as well. So this is another way of telling the creation story, except of course this in this case it's in this disputation between God and Job, basically saying, uh, so Job, where were you in Genesis chapter 1? Where were you when I laid these foundations of the earth and measured everything out? I stretched the plumb line to make sure everything was as it should be. I I sunk the bases of the earth into the sea. I laid the cornerstone. That word cornerstone could also be translated as capstone. So either the base or the very last part of the structure that's put together. So creation is depicted here as this immense edifice that God has made. You got cornerstones, you got foundations, you got capstones, you got everything measured and lined up. So God lays the foundation, and from there he builds upward. And he's saying to Job, I did all this. I determined it. Creation it's not some kind of eternal existence. It came in time, and I'm the one who brought it into being. And not only did that happen, but when it happened, there was great rejoicing because you have the image of morning stars singing together and all the sons of God shouting for joy. It's just like when the temple was constructed, you have great singing and rejoicing afterwards. So when creation was constructed, now you have all this rejoicing afterward. And the sons of God in Job are the B'nai Elohim. We hear about them in the opening couple of chapters of Job. These are the angels. Could be that the morning stars are in parallel with that. So the sons of God and the morning stars are both referring to these same heavenly creatures that God has made. Could be that the morning stars are in reference to actual stars. A little bit of ambiguity there, but either way, you have the creation responding with song because of what God has done.
Yeah, one of the things, this kind of feels like, in one way, Job's getting what he wants, but it's not going to go the way that he envisioned it going. So, like, for a long time now, Job's been saying, if I could just talk to God, if I could just have this one-on-one with him, if I could just, explain my case, I could show him why this is all unjust and this shouldn't be happening, and if I could get a little court appearance with God. And then God shows up, and that's kind of how I view God, why God's saying, like, all right, stand up, man. You wanted this. You've been calling for this. Like, you wanted this audience with me, and now you got it. But it's not going to go the way that you think it's going to go, because I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and you're not going to have, I mean, you're going to have the answer to the questions, but these aren't, I'm not going to give you the answer to the questions you want. It reminds me of, I have a friend who is a mathematician. He does like computational engineering and all this stuff. And I asked him once, he had gotten a new job working on jets and stuff. And I was like, so what exactly is it that you do? And he said to me, he's like, oh man, like, I don't want to be offensive, but like, I could explain it to you, but like, you're not going to understand it. Which is just a nice way of him not trying to like waste the conversation. Like, we should move on to something else. Like I could explain this to you, but dude, you're not going to get it. You're just going to be nodding your head there like an idiot, pretending like you understand anything I'm talking about. I feel like sometimes with God, and this is what Job is getting. Job wants the answers, and we want the answers too. Like, and I still don't have the full answer. Like, why did God allow this to happen? Why did he? And I think that sometimes the answers that God gives is like, I could try to explain it to you, but you will understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and we're gonna see like what he just said here. And as he goes on, like, where were you when this happened? Where is a way of saying you're not going, like, were you around for all this stuff? Oh, you weren't. Also, you won't understand why I do some of the things I do.
Yeah. If you aren't around for this, then there's no way you're going to understand the operation of creation and even your own life now.
Yeah.
And he'll continue with the same theme in the next few verses, that next few sections that come up. So we have this beginning of creation set up as this edifice, rejoicing when it's done. He's going to shift now to the sea. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. So it's actually a pretty common Near Eastern image of God taking the deep or the seas or the oceans and ruling over them, binding them, putting them in their place, as it were. This isn't reflected in Genesis chapter 1, but it is frequently found in other parts of Scripture, especially in the Psalms and in some of the prophets as well. So it's this idea of, the sea is burst, it's born, it bursts forth from the womb. And God, I love this. God swaddles it, right? He swaddles it like he would
Yeah.
swaddle a baby, wraps around it thick darkness. That's its swaddling bands. And it's almost the idea of like you put a baby in the crib. A crib has little bars, and this is only as far as this baby's allowed to go until they crawl out of the crib. But anyway, they got the crib set up. And that's kind of the idea here. I prescribe limits for it and set bars and doors and said, thus far shall you come and no farther. So he's cribbed the ocean. He said, all right, I've swaddled you. I put your boundaries. The beach is as far as you can come. That's the edge of your crib. And thus far you shall go no farther. And of course, God is saying to Job, were you there when all this happened? No, you weren't. I was. In fact, I'm the one who set everything up the way that it is. Okay, he's going to continue with this in the next section, which begins with verse 12. Have you commanded the morning since your days began, and caused the dawn to know its place, that it might take hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it? It is changed like clay under the seal, and its features stand out like a garment. From the wicked, their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. This one's a bit more of a challenge. In fact, there's a lot of debate among the various commentators as to whether actually this word translated as wicked might stand for some sort of celestial body, or maybe should be translated a little bit differently. But if we go with the standard translation of wicked, what seems to be taking place is this. So he starts out with, have you commanded the morning since your days began, or caused the dawn to know its place? So now we're talking about the daily shift from morning to evening. So were you there when, have you commanded these things to take place? Now, verse 13, taking hold of the skirts of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it. It's kind of this idea of like a blanket or some kind of garment, and you take hold of it and you shake it out. Maybe it has dirt on it, or maybe it has something else on it you're trying to get off there. And this is the image of God taking creation and shaking it in order that the wicked might fall from it. So if that's the right translation, then it's his idea of destroying them, of judging them. And then verse 14 shifts to, it's kind of the idea of like when the sun is gradually coming up. If you've been out in the dark, say you're a deer hunter, and you're in a stand, you get there well before sunrise. Everything is you can kind of see features here and there, but it's still pretty difficult to make out certain shapes and forms. But as the sun comes up, all of a sudden you can see more clearly. You can differentiate things. You can see different sizes and shapes of things. That seems to be what's described at the beginning of 14. It is changed like clay under the seal. So it's kind of this flat piece of clay. But when the seal gets on it, when the seal is pressed into it, then it has texture and shape. And you can see what is no longer just a flat piece of clay, but it has these forms and features. So the dawn does that when the light arises on creation. And then at the very end, it says, from the wicked, their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken, which just kind of continues the same idea of God taking people who cloak their deeds under darkness and bringing those to light and judging them accordingly. So that's 12 through 15.
Yeah, it is an interesting shift, because he kind of moves to this Hey, Job, you've been alive for a little while. Have you figured out how to do any of these things yet? So maybe you weren't there like when certain things were created, but you've been around a little bit. Have you figured out how to maybe cause the dawn to happen? Have you figured that one out? You've had a long time to figure it out. You doing that? You figured out how to shake the wicked from the earth? You figured out how to, because what it seems like is you say it's Job is obviously one of the complaints here, and then this would also go to Job's friends is like, well, bad things are happening to you, Job, and bad things are what happened to wicked people, and so that's what it is. And Job's over here saying, I'm not a wicked person, so why is this happening to me? And it seems like God is saying, I don't think you guys know how I deal with wicked people at all. Seems like you haven't figured that out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's more of an unveiling of the ignorance of humanity, Job included. So if they weren't there at the founding of the earth, if they don't know how the sea was swaddled, if they're not there commanding the dawn, then certainly they don't know how God deals with the wicked either.
Well, it's one of those things like they would be like, okay, you're covered in boils, and you had all these like horrific tragedies happen in your life, and that's how God deals with the wicked. And God seems to be saying, like, I don't need to use boils and tragedy to deal with the wicked. When I want to deal with the wicked, it's like grabbing a blanket that's got dirt on it, and I just shake them off.
Yeah, do a little shake, and then it's clean.
Yeah, I don't have to go through all this. Like, it's much easier for me to deal with wickedness than that.
Yeah. So verse 16 is gonna continue with this. So we're gonna move now into the depths of the ocean. So have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all this. So this is continuing this, what you might call Hebrew cosmology, this idea of the universe, where you have foundations at the bottom of the ocean. They're holding up the earth, and the sky is above the earth. And so now we're moving downward into what are called here the springs of the sea, or the recesses of the deep. And this would be these underwater sources of the ocean, of the waters of the ocean. Again, this isn't meant to be science. This is just the poetic description of how the Hebrews viewed the world from their perception, from their understanding of how things operated. So, were you there? I mean, have you taken a tour of the ocean floor, Job, and saw how all the water comes into existence through these springs of the sea? Or even beyond that, have you gone even deeper? I mean, so we have the gates of death, or the gates of deep darkness. Have you been there? Like, have you stepped up to these gates of the underworld, which is what this is talking about? So Sheol or Abaddon. A lot of the people in the ancient world believe that there were like 7 different gates to Sheol, or to the underworld, and that's probably something reflected here. There's entrance points anyway into the underworld, just like Jesus will talk about in Matthew. The gates of hell, this entry point into death. So have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen these gates of deep darkness? Or have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? So declare it if you know all this. So, God's basically just taken Job on this tour, right? From dawn to the heavens, to the founding of the earth, now into the very depths of the ocean. And of course, we get the impact all of this is making. And imagine you're Job, and you're sitting there, or maybe he's standing up at this point, but whatever posture he has, God's talking to him. And Job is probably thinking to himself, oh man, this is not the word that I was expecting. This is I did want a word from God. I mean, so he's giving that to me. I did want God to speak. He's talking to me now, but definitely not the speech that I was anticipating. And he's not done yet. I mean, he's got a long ways to go. But the impact upon Job is already definitely happening. It's sinking in at this point.
Yeah, I love this declare. If you know all this, I mean, this is just get he's just getting started, but he's also saying, hey, stop me when the answer is yes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, feel free to interrupt when you're like, yes, yeah, that's the one. I do know about that. Yeah, I was there for that. I can speak to that.
Yeah. Slight pause. Did you have anything to add, Job?
Yeah.
I mean, when you were there, did you see something that I have accidentally left out here?
Don't be shy. Like,
Yeah.
speak up when the answer is yes.
Jump in at any time. Verse 19. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? And where is the place of darkness? That you may take it to its territory, that you may discern the path to its home. You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great. This is divine sarcasm at its finest here. So, uh, so we have light and darkness. So the dwelling of light and the place of darkness. Probably meaning it's this idea that you got a day shift and a night shift, right? You got two guys here personified as light and darkness, and one works during the day and the other works at night. But they have the same address. They live in the same place. So when one is crossing the threshold in, the other's crossing the threshold out. Dwelling of light, dwelling of darkness. And he says to Job, do you know that address? Do you know the way to get there? And do you know how to, direct its path home so it can go back to its territory? So have you traced all this out? Do you have a GPS that's taken you to this dwelling of light and darkness, and you know the path to each of these places? And then verse 21, God is just going full sarcasm mode because he says, doesn't even ask Job. This is not even a rhetorical question. He doesn't say, were you born then? Are the number of your days so great that they go all the way back to creation? No, God's just like, oh yeah, Job, you have to know. I mean, you were born then. The number of your days is great.
Yeah, this is God. Yeah, after saying this, being like, oh, what am I talking about? What a silly question. Of course you know. You've been around forever. Yeah. You know this.
You too are everlasting as I am, Job. Okay, so 22, next section. Now we're going to get into a bit of weather here. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? Where is the way to the place where the light is distributed, or where the east wind is scattered upon the earth? So, storehouses of snow, storehouses of hail, which interestingly, in this case, God says he reserves these storehouses, like he's keeping a supply here for the day of battle and war. Now, I can't remember, just off the top of my head, if snow was ever involved in Israelite warfare, but hail was.
Yeah.
I mean, we do have examples of where God used hailstones to destroy the enemy. Maybe there's something I'm forgetting about, but either way, in this case, the snow is highlighted and the hail are highlighted. They're kind of like an armory, right? I got my weapons here. I got me some snow weapons. I got me some hail weapons. And God says, I know where those are at. In fact, I've set them up. I've got these armories of of weather that I can use to cast down these icy fragments on the adversaries. In fact, I got east wind. I've got it ready to go. I got light. I got it ready to go. I've been to all these places. I've entered into these storehouses. I've set everything up. What about you, Job? Have you been there? All right. 25 is the next section, 25 through 27. Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain and a way for the thunderbolt to bring rain on the land where no man is, on the desert in which there is no man, to satisfy the waste and desolate land and to make the ground sprout with grass? Has the rain a father? Or who has begotten the drops of dew? From whose womb did the ice come forth? And who has given birth to the frost of heaven? The waters become hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. That's actually so 25 through 30, that section. So I mean, this fits with again more the kind of the ancient view of creation and where the rain comes from. So you have this like cleaving a channel for the torrents of rain, away for the thunderbolt, kind of orchestrating the heavens so that the rain knows where to go, the thunderbolt knows where to fall. And I think 26 says this rain comes to a land where no man is, or a desert in which there is no man, as a way of highlighting the fact that it's not like God just is taking care of cities or towns or villages where people live. He's taking care of everything. It can be a desert where there's not a single human habitant, but God brings rain there. It can be, a deserted island or whatever where there's no people. Still, God's taking rain there. He's making a way for the thunderbolts. And then verse 28 says, has the rain a father who has begotten the drops of dew. So is there some paternity to the rain that we need to check on, or have the drops of dew been born on a certain day? Does the ice come from a womb, or does the frost, is it born? You tell me, Job. Where do all these things come from? Where do all the aspects of weather, whether that's rain or ice or frost or uh, bolts of lightning, you explain to me where the source of all of these lies. Moving on, we have some constellations in the next section. So, verse 31 through 33. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loose the cords of Orion? Or that could be translated belt too. Have you loose the belt of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazarot in their season? Come back to that in a second. Or can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule on the earth? So you have the Pleiades and Orion and the bear. I think we're all familiar with those constellations. I learned something this morning, by the way. So the Subaru logo, can you kind of picture that? It's got like the big star and the 5 smaller stars.
Mm-hmm.
That's patterned after the Pleiades.
Ah.
In fact, I just was looking up some information on this, and turns out someone's probably going to correct me on this, but from what I was able to gather, the Japanese word for Subaru is actually the word for Pleiades, for that constellation. So anyway, the Pleiades, the Orion, and the bear. So have you put these in their place? Are you able to guide them, to lead them, to orchestrate the way that they're all joined together? Now, the Mazarot in the beginning of verse 32 only occurs here in the Old Testament, so there's plenty of debate about exactly what it means, but it can just kind of be possibly a general word that refers to the constellations. But either way, all of these are, of course, put in place by God, and now he's asking Job, can you lead them forth? Can you bind them? Can you loose them? Can you guide them? Do you know the way that the heavens are set up, and can you establish their rule on the earth? Probably it's not so much their existence that God is talking about, but the various ways in which they reflect the seasons or are connected with understandings about what weather is coming. That's probably the overall import of what God is telling Job in that section.
Yeah, I mean, the implication here is that, do you know anything about these things, right? I mean, never mind. Like, could you create them? Like, do you know anything about them? Can you do anything with them? Can you do you know why they're there? Do you know? Could you control them?
Yeah. So the argument keeps building from here. I think we can do one more. In fact, this will bring us to the end of this first section about the various elements of creation. Can you lift up your voice to the clouds that a flood of water may cover you? So can you like call upon the heavens to send rain down? Just lift your voice and say, rain on me, flood down on me. Of course, no, you cannot. Can you send forth lightnings that they may go and say to you, here we are? I get the image of like a king calling his servants, hey, you, come here. Like God is calling the lightning, and the lightning just shows up. It's like, here we are. What do you need? So Job, can you do that? Can you call for the lightning so that it shows up and You have a bolt of lightning standing in front of you saying, well, here we are. What do you need? We'll go wherever you direct us. And of course, no, you cannot. Who has put wisdom in the inward parts or given understanding to the mind? Now, that's a challenging section because even if you checked the various translations, but this is rendered all sorts of ways. So the inward parts and the mind are the words in Hebrew, which can be taken multiple different ways. Some people take these as references to stars. Some people take these as references, in fact, to birds. So the NIV has, who gives the ibis wisdom or gives the rooster understanding. So the Hebrew is unclear. There's actually some pretty good argumentation for the NIV translation, because certain birds in the ancient world were thought to have been endowed by God with the ability, for instance, to predict by their movements the rise of the Nile, or by certain actions to indicate that rain was on the way. And I mean, actually, that kind of makes sense because you observe the behavior of animals in the wild, it's often indicative of a storm coming. They just know. They're like divinely programmed to be that way. So maybe that's what's going on here. So God put wisdom in these birds, or gave understanding to these birds, so that they would be able, by their actions, to indicate that certain weather's coming. I mean, that would kind of make sense in this section that's all about weather and rain and whatnot. He goes on, who can number the clouds by wisdom, or who can tilt the water skins of the heavens when the dust runs into a mass and the clods stick fast together? So he wraps it up with talking about, by a series of rhetorical questions, the inability of Job to control the weather, to predict the weather, to do all the things that, of course, God does, and that even some of his creatures have done with the abilities that God has given to them. Anyway, that's the first section. Of course, there's more to come, but we don't get 2 or 3 verses into it, and we understand where this is going. Where were you? How can you do this? And the answer, of course, is always, he was not there. He could not do this. And so Job's ability to grasp the vastness of creation and God's design of creation also then is certainly a pointer to the fact that he can't understand what God is doing with his own sufferings and all the other elements of the world's life.
Yeah, it's a very long way, but it's a thorough way. We'll say it's a thorough way of God saying, if you can't understand all of these things, then my explanation to you is not going to make any sense. In other words, for me to explain to you why I do the things I do, you would have to know what I know, which you don't.
Yeah. Perfect way of putting it.
All right. Well, we'll leave it right there. God has got more to say for sure, and we will we'll get back into that next episode. Chad, I'll see you then.
All right. We'll see you then. Hello, 1517 podcast listeners. This is Chad Bird, co-host of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament, with an announcement from the 1517 Podcast Network. Throughout the entire month of June, the Podcast Network at 1517 is launching a special fundraiser, and I need your help. Every dollar you contribute will be matched by 2 generous donors, doubling the impact of your generosity. The Podcast Network needs to raise $150,000 in an effort to support the ongoing creation and expansion of our shows. The funds raised will play a crucial role in expanding our network onto additional platforms, such as YouTube, and strategically reaching new audiences with the gospel. Your support isn't just a figurative donation. It's a tangible investment in the people and tools necessary to maintain and expand the work of our podcast. please help us to reach our $150,000 goal. Simply visit www.1517.org/donate-podcast today. Thank you for being an integral partner of the 1517 podcast community and for your unwavering dedication to sharing the pure gospel through our shows.